Bombs are impossible without egregors. The devil is impossible without egregors. Such a life is contraindicated for people. There is no religion. At the same time, I fully understand that there are traditions that establish interactions with people. So it's just to empty them out. In a certain sense, some people need to have a master. They need someone who will bring predictability and structure to their lives, a person who chooses the path of everyday life, understandable and simple. In the end, it ends up in a grave.
The viewer writes, from 25 to 31 years is a difficult period for Earth and all of humanity. We need to raise the frequency of our vibrations, our consciousness, and the radiation of thought forms. People whose vibrations do not transform will move to another dimension. Is that so?
To what exact dimension?
To the grave.
Well, apparently one can generally agree with the person's statement. But I don't like it. Terminology, I can't agree with the terminology. Well, let's correct it. The frequency of vibrations. So what is frequency? These are oscillatory movements. You need to oscillate more strongly. It's not entirely accurate. A person can only free their nature of consciousness if they fully accept themselves. If he says, this part of me is good and this part is bad, how will he free his consciousness? Because part of his consciousness turns out to be bad? How will it help him raise the purity, just purely as a technical term? Shake more, pulse more. No, flow. You need to flow to be flexible. Like the flame of a fire, it has a parameter called purity. I wouldn't say that.
Now, many people say that you should be at high vibrations, in such good states. And for example, if a person stays in their suffering, in anger, in aggression, they simply won't be living. Or will they remove him because he doesn't match, so to speak, the vibrations of our Earth, as it's trendy to say now?
The vibrations of our Earth are broadband. There are both high frequency and low frequency ones. Let me explain it more simply using more understandable processes. For example, there's the harp, a musical instrument. There are strings that are low frequency, and there are strings that are high frequency. And if we take this musical instrument and say, let's keep the strings up to here and cut everything else, will this be the right process? No. So there can't be any high frequency consciousness. It can be whole, united, dancing, fiery and flexible. But it's not a matter of purity, it's a matter of freedom. It's about freeing your consciousness from constraining structures, from spasms, from some rough, heavy concepts, from concentrating on heavy processes. It needs to be freed from this. But it's not about raising the frequency, it's about liberation. So I can agree that if a person doesn't free their consciousness, they will shrink, will fade away, and in the end perish. That's right. But this will happen, and not just that. During this period, it happens permanently to a person. At any moment in time he lives, it still happens to him. And people who are most susceptible to limiting their consciousness, who are most prone to conceptuality and restriction, they break down faster. Their bodies break down, their psyche collapses, and their energy gets constricted and stalled. So you need to free your consciousness. You need to accept yourself completely. There's no need to cut out the strings, and chasing after frequencies is pointless. So what makes sense to chase after? It's about freedom. It's about freedom, specifically the ability to perceive in a broader spectrum, to move in wider planes and vectors, to think beyond the material world and reach out with your thoughts to the fundamental causes of everything that is happening. So it makes sense to move in this direction, yes, and the people who are doing this, yes, they don't even really notice these events. It all just passes by. It's like the city noise somewhere out there, and people who immerse themselves in it, yeah, no frequencies will save them. It just leads to a dead end if they keep diving in like moths to a flame. I mean, regarding the upcoming events, no, you need to move in accordance with what resonates with your soul, with what ignites your heart, with what awakens in you a sense of love, a sense of sincerity. Everything else is just a stage on which you dance.
No more than that. But some people just don't understand you at all. For example, a comment knows everything, understands and lives in a special way. I've read a lot, I understand everything. And what comes next? What can be changed? Just chatter, Here lives an enlightened one. So how is his life different from ours? Those who know nothing understand nothing. And how do these insights help you live and then move on to another world? What do you think about this? And how is your life even different from the lives of those people?
Let's start from the beginning. People don't understand me because they don't know me. I've read a lot wouldn't exist. If he knew me, then a phrase like I've read a lot wouldn't exist. Because what I'm showing now, what I'm sharing, is not a result of reading. It's a result of practices. It's a result of a way of life. It's the result of practices. It's the result of a way of life, of many years of lifestyle. And in the tradition where I received this knowledge, there was never anything like reading something and writing something down. Are you training or something? Are you doing it? Or have you already trained in something and you're just doing it? There wasn't even a process like writing something down, recording it, or dictating it to myself to remember later. Just skill, pure skill. So the person simply doesn't know me and, based on their ignorance, makes assumptions. What can I do about that? I'll say this: you just need to get to know me better, and that's it. Then they won't have such conclusions. What's the main meaning in your teaching? Meaning for whom? For me, there is meaning. It's my intention. I live to fulfill my intention. For people who have intention, it seems there is meaning, because I know more than they do. And they have the opportunity to reach the methods I use much faster through me. I'm here to fulfill my intention. And they have the opportunity to reach the methods I use much faster through me. I'm here to fulfill my intention. My intention is freedom. I'm moving in that direction. If this resonates with someone, if someone finds it interesting, they can move along with me. This is the meaning of my existence, that I am useful to myself and I am useful to those people whose intentions are similar to mine. I am useful for those people who are looking for knowledge that is not described in books, because a lot of what I say is not on the internet. It's not being searched for. This information isn't available on websites at all. I can be useful to these people. I am useful to those who are goal-oriented. I am useful to those who want to acquire skills, who want to master their craft, because I live that way myself. I move that way myself. And I don't have the task of saving everyone. Because humanity, the history of Christianity, shows what happens to those who try to save everyone.
For some people, for example, your straightforwardness and simple attitude towards life can be quite striking. Comment: a person understands nothing about spirituality. Life is more complicated than just wanting or not wanting. If he gets sick now and his wife leaves him, will he like that situation? And really, what's the problem?
The problem is that I don't have a wife, and she won't leave me. The problem is that I dedicated 2/3 of my life to practices, and I didn't have time, just not for family, not even for a somewhat decent career, just not for family, not even for a somewhat decent career. That's the problem. The problem is that if I get sick, I will clearly know that I am going to get sick. I will even know in advance that if I continue to do a certain action or behavior right now, it will lead me to illness. I won't have any doubts about why this happened. It would just be such a foolish thing for me to do, and it's a conscious, controlled foolishness. A person just made up some image of me. I was outraged by that image and wrote a comment. And how much does this image of me correspond to reality? That's quite a big question. Actually, and even from his initial statements, it turns out that this image doesn't correspond to reality. So there's really nothing to be outraged about.
Scary energy informational structures that control human consciousness and prevent it from developing. Some people believe that you create such a structure yourself and lure people into it. Here's the comment: it's all within his traditions? Again, it's his egregor that he's promoting. What's the point of all this nonsense? To what end?
A person creates an egregor, and an egregor cannot be born on its own. But this egregor is created by a group of people. In order for this egregor to be created, people must initially feed it. That is to say, direct a bunch of your resources into it. Then this egregor will start to take shape, and the newcomers will also need to direct their attention to this egregor. In order to direct attention to the egregor, some signs, symbols, and symbolism will be needed. Accordingly, when creating an egregor, people who understand this topic impose symbols, they impose images, they impose pictures, they impose figurines. What do I do with all of this? This is a comment from a person. Again, someone who lives with their own ideas about me and at the same time doesn't really know anything. And the people who practice with me know that I direct a person's attention to the person themselves. I say that there is a creator in each of us. I say that each of us has all the energies that one can possibly imagine. I'm saying that we don't even need to travel to power spots, because each of us can become that power spot. I'm showing how to do it. I provide settings for these processes. I teach people to see energies so that no one can deceive them in any way. Because when you see yourself, you can't be deceived. It's impossible. I teach people by my example, through the practices I've received, how to get out of the state of jnana, that is, from the constant search outside, into a state, a form, where you're not searching for anything anymore, where you're just exploring what interests you. And these people, first and foremost, mostly study me. What is my energy like? What I have already trained, what transformations I have gone through. And they say to them, I want that too. But why didn't you talk about this? I say, well, you still need to give it gradually. If you come to the first grade and they start telling you about strength of materials, you probably won't understand anything. It's the same here. We're moving along slowly. Right now, you see my configuration, you want the same configuration, and I already have the opportunity to tell you all about it. So the commentator just made up some concept and attributed it to this concept. I was accused of this concept, and so what? Now I want to ask, okay, you did it, and then what? Are you going to live 100 years longer? Does aging stop? Or maybe you'll gain absolute health? So, what has changed in a person's life? Are you going to experience aging? Or maybe you'll gain absolute health? So what has changed in a person's life? Who wrote this comment? I, for example, know what to do. I am moving within the framework of realizing my intention. Not the intention of my ashram, not the intention of my tradition, not the intention of some deity or religion, but my own intention, the one that resonates with my soul. That is the very goal following which my heart ignites. And to the people who come to me, I say, guys, don't you dare take me as an example. Come up with your own goals, your own intention, your own path. I'll help you. I'll guide you. Come up with your goals. Your own intention, your own path. I'll help you. I'll guide you. I'll make sure you move along your path quickly, clearly, and effectively. I'll make sure you move along your path quickly. Clear, effective, but I will not go through this path for you. I won't come up with this path for you. That's the point of what I'm saying, that we don't have any common destination. At the same time, there are people who say, hey, I like your destination, so I'm going to move with you. I say, okay, we'll move together towards that destination that we both like. 3 of us, not with a setter. And there are people who say, well, your destination is cool, but we've come up with something better for ourselves and they're doing great. Because of their manifestation, their determination, even more independent, even more honest. Because again, sometimes it happens that a person driven by doubts takes someone's side, not because he wants to. And it's because, well, what if I make a mistake? What if I do something wrong? At its core, it's the wrong approach. Do it wrong, make a mistake, and then you'll never doubt it again. So when I was setting my intention, I didn't just say from day one, I want freedom. I came up with all sorts of things for myself. But every time I achieved something, I realized that it wasn't enough. I want to fine-tune, adjust, and feel my way through. I was looking for my intention, but I was searching for it not by just sitting and thinking, but through actions and deeds. By fulfilling some of my intermediate needs and desires, those people who can come to me, train, learn, and say to me, we have our own goal. These are wonderful people. We have our own goal. These are wonderful people. Because these are the people who are honest within themselves. And those people who come to me and say, listen, we came for the same thing you did. In most cases, I'm not saying for everyone, but in most cases, over time, they do find their own goal. Well, some admit that, yes, we came for freedom, but it turns out that we actually want something a little different. And that's wonderful. Well, some admit that, yes, we came for freedom, but it turns out that we actually want something a little different. And that's wonderful. And with these people, you can move forward in practices, very deep practices, because they are no longer dependent on me. They are not hanging on my goal. They are free from me. They are free from my goal. They are free from my tradition, but they already have the skills and experience that allow them to move towards their own goals much faster and more efficiently. then if they didn't possess all of this, here is the reality, here is what I show, here is what I teach, not what was written in that comment. Terror, fear, everything is bad. At the same time, I fully understand that there are traditions that build interactions with people. So just to drain them through specially built structures and egregor structures that exist too. Yes, our world is multifaceted.
So, but there is something else we have. A comment on the topic of egregors. I'm reading it out. How much can we scare people with egregors? It has long been known that there are egregors, constructive and destructive, and it's better to connect with the constructive ones. But how will we live without an egregor? We won't have any energy. And the idea that you can't get out of egregors is also just a scare tactic. And a good income for all sorts of schizopterics who disconnect from the egregor, remove curses and so on. A person is both their own god and their own devil, and they choose who to be with and who not to be with. And the egregor provides stability. Without it, a person is like a tumbleweed, blown wherever the wind goes. You can't trust anyone right now. By the way, our enlightened one has his own egregor, and he's looking for followers. What do you think of that comment?
Is this really written about me? I find this comment quite funny, because a person in one phrase, in one alt text, uses such a correct expression that everyone is their own god and devil, and at the same time calmly asserts that it's impossible to live without egregors. That everyone is their own god and devil, and at the same time calmly asserts that it's impossible to live without egregors. God, it's impossible without egregors. It's impossible to have a devil without egregors.
Well, by the way, your student was also asking if it's possible to live without them.
Yes, of course it is possible. I live without them and feel fine. It's just a bit of a different life, and in a certain sense, such a life is contraindicated for some people. And some people without egregors, I mean, they need to have a master. They need someone who will bring predictability and structure to their lives. It's not a secret. For example, there are people who feel great in the army, and there are people who just go crazy from such systematization. There are people who can't live in freedom outside the walls of the prison. They just can't. No way. And they commit some minor offenses just to return to that world which is familiar, predictable, and very strictly regulated. There are such people. Yes, we don't interfere with such people living. I don't interfere with anyone's life at all. I'm not looking for followers. I'm looking for practitioners. I'm looking for those who will practice with me. I'm looking for those who can we move with into those spaces, into the states that I am still training in, practicing and exploring myself. The formation of an egregor occurs through a precisely calibrated mechanism. I don't have those mechanisms. On the contrary, the mechanisms I have don't allow it to form. How to form an egregor if the person who comes to me is looking inward with their attention? How will he form this egregor? If a person who comes to practice, what's the first thing they hear from me? It's a comfortable body position and a turned off inner dialogue. I don't even let people think to get their word jumble going, because it's the thoughts that start to form the egregor. It's precisely the thoughts that pull you away from your energy and immerse you in illusions.
But if it exists, then it must be needed for something. What is it needed for?
Egregores. Yes, in order for a certain community of people to survive. If one society's games are stronger than another's, then the other society won't survive. It will be absorbed those whose ideas are strong, whose ideals are better, whose worldview penetrates deeper into another person's mind. It's a struggle of ideals. It's a struggle of values. It's a struggle of positions. I've already fought enough. I don't want to fight anymore. I want freedom. I want to leave the area where the struggle is happening. Freedom. I want to leave the area where the struggle is happening. And so entering into this struggle is madness on my part. What egregor? There is no egregor. There is only me, my energy, and the energy of those people who come to me. Because yes, people come to me connected to various egregors, to the state, corporate, some ideological one. But they are not disconnected. Egregors. I don't even have a service for disconnecting from egregors. I have a service for personal development. And so when a person develops and their energy starts to strengthen at some point, the egregor simply can't attach itself to this person. The fiery energy is becoming, look, For example, there are 4 states of water. Here is water, like ice, and you can hit it with a hammer and it will crack. There is a state of water, like a liquid. You can drink it, you can consume it in this state, but try it, use the steam. Try to drink it. You wouldn't want to do that. And what if it's plasma? Water can exist in a plasma state. The temperature there is over 1,000,000 degrees, maybe with plasma. What are you going to do with it? How are you even going to get close to it? And those transformations, those changes that I guide a person towards are in a plasma state. What egregor? How can we form egregors if everything around us that doesn't relate to us, everything that is foreign and alien to us, just burns away immediately? It can't even reach us. How can some other egregor reach a person practicing these states? Yeah, it can't reach him at all. You simply become outside of this system. Yes, it imposes certain other ways of life, not like those that are familiar to most people. Most are familiar with living with egregors. Choosing the simple path leads to a grave. Choosing practice means rebirth. But there's a nuance. A person who chooses the path of everyday life, the understandable and simple one, ultimately ends up in a grave. And a person who chooses the path of practice gets a chance to be reborn, and sometimes occasionally. And a person who chooses the path of practice gets a chance to be reborn further, and sometimes, occasionally. I'm reaching the informational spaces. The story is that someone left in the body of light, someone dissolved, someone disappeared. Not in the sense that he was abducted, but in the sense that he transformed from a material state into an energetic state. And it's exactly in this direction that I'm moving, and those people who are moving with me are moving in this direction too. We are not forming games. We are gradually being reborn.
Well, for example, you don't have an egregor, I don't have egregors. Can we all be without it on this planet?
Technically, it is possible. Practically, we have what we have. For a person to not be able to create an egregor, they must have a very fiery energy, very dynamic energy. They need to be in a plasma state, very dynamic energy. He must be in a plasma state. If all the people on our planet enter a plasma state, all the egregors will immediately be claimed. But that's equivalent to, just like not everyone can become president, just like not everyone can be in a plasma state, although technically, please, no one is stopping you. But, as this commentator wrote, everyone is their own god, everyone is their own devil.
There's an opinion that teachings like Buddhism and your tradition don't allow you to see reality as it is. Specifically, there is a battle of the gods happening on Earth right now, and here's the comment. What kind of esoteric person doesn't see that the gods are already here, that the battle is already happening? It's some kind of utopia. He will be very surprised, probably when the time comes. I understand him. I got stuck in Buddhism in my past life and didn't see a lot.
My tradition has nothing to do with Buddhism. That's 1. 2, I don't care what entertains God. 3, I seek the divine within myself, not outside. I seek within myself manifestations of Shiva, Shakti, and Ganesha, and the currency of Tripura Sundari. Within myself, if there are any battles going on, it's the battle between my desire for freedom and my foolishness, which still doesn't give me the opportunity to realize my intention. It's a battle with oneself. The person who wrote this comment has some idea about life. In this view of life, I'm grouped with others. Listeners know everything is within us, right here without moving. However, those who actually listen to what I'm saying are well aware that everything is within us. And all the gods, all the energies, all the manifestations, all the processes, they're all here, without even getting up from the chair. At the same time, they naturally have manifestations in the external world. Yes, let someone fight with someone, always. Someone fights with someone. But I don't care about that at all. I only care about realizing my intention. And the people who practice with me, for the most part, they only care about realizing their intentions too. And with some it resonates, with others it doesn't. But the method is the same for realization. Mastery, what's mastery there and what's mastery here? What a person wants is to reach one point in space and then another point in space. The mechanism is the same. That's why we practice together but live separately. There is no religion. There is a path. The path truly has a heart, and each person's path is independent.
We found a comment that exposes you. A viewer writes, paid off, Anton, sold his soul to the Horned One for power, money, and energy. And so he serves him faithfully. All the evil comes from him. Be peace, be good.
But this person didn't specify which exact account and where exactly this money is located.
No, that's what we would like.
I could use them.
So who is paying you?
Build a home for practitioners. So there's a place to dive into transcendent states. People say a lot of things. There will always be those who speak the truth, and there will always be those who speak lies. I am moving towards the point of realizing my intention. As I move towards this point, it's really hard for me to be of any help to anyone in the power structures, in the government structures. I don't even quite understand what exactly is paying me. Is it true that Putin is a puppet? So was I supposed to get paid for this? What exactly was paid for? In this commentator's opinion, it's unclear. The fact that a person has power, yes, they have power. Who can deny this? Only a madman would deny this. And he has insane power? It's true, I still say that. But if we take, for example, other representatives of humanity who hold a fairly high hierarchical position, then they also have power, and there can also be a very ambiguous attitude towards them. Even in the concept that someone bought me for which I was paid money, it's unclear to me. So the whole revelation is kind of weak. Of course, no one paid me anything. No one hired me anywhere. I'm just sharing what I see. I give people the opportunity to see as well, so that they no longer listen to what someone else is saying, but can check it for themselves based on their own experience and abilities. I continue to pursue my intention. It's not the intention of the state, not the intention of another person, not even the intention of my teacher. I am pursuing my intention, and I urge other people who at least listen to me to do the same, because only your own intention can resonate with you. And in no other variations, this deep, subtle processes are connected to sincerity, unconditional love, interaction, and the connection with your soul. And in all of this, there are no such rigid, limited structures, like the state and everything related to it.
A lot of people are concerned about the fact that you eat meat. For example, they write, he read so many ancient scriptures, but they didn't give him anything. He was ignorant and he remains so. In yoga, one of the important principles is ahimsa, which means not to harm. Eating meat is killing. To kill someone is to harm. For an ordinary systematic person, it's normal to eat meat. But if you enter the line of teaching, liberation is a necessary rule, so he is usually a chatterbox who considers himself a guru of enlightenment through digestion.
Here's what we deserve. If it were that simple, if it worked that way. In fact, how many people would already be enlightened by now? The world, the reality we find ourselves in from that perspective, doesn't agree. In fact, how many people would already be enlightened by now? The world, the reality we find ourselves in from that perspective doesn't agree. It's not even my whim anymore, nor my concepts. This is just the reality of what's happening. And in this reality, we see how vegetarian parents are harming their children. Breatharians lead those who believe in them to exhaustion. I am a person who practiced without water and food for 7 days. I practiced without food, only on water for 21 days. I touched all of this with my hands. I figured it out. I know how it works. And I declare with all responsibility that, guys, you won't achieve enlightenment through your guts. After reading ancient texts, I saw how Shiva, the god, presents offerings. To God, Mahadeva. The meat that a person hunted for sustenance, he kept part for himself and gave part to God, Shiva. And Shiva accepted these gifts because he accepts all sincere offerings and presents. And a person didn't kill the animal to offer it as a gift. A man killed an animal in order to eat it. But he dedicated part of his diet to Mahadeva, and everything was great. It all worked. If the person who wrote this comment has only read modern books, it justifies him. If he had read ancient books, he would probably know more. Why be hypocritical? If he had read ancient books that are 5,000 years old, he would probably know much more about our reality than he currently perceives. Why does this person allow himself to be hypocritical, separating the life of an animal and the life of a plant? A plant also wants to live. It can think too. It can interact with you. If you have developed extrasensory abilities, you can go and talk to a tree. You can talk to the carrot that longs for life, that doesn't want to be digested by you. Can you look at it from an energetic level? How garlic resists the process of digestion, like the onion inside you resists and tries with all its might to survive. You have it in your stomach, but no, you're limited with an exclusively narrow perception of reality, which can exist. It defines nothing. It is fundamentally a given that in the present time, in order to live in a physical body, we must kill. Plants kill animals, and people may even kill each other to survive. To change this, we must stop eating and switch to pranic nourishment, in which we live. If we talk about ending this reality, then we need to stop consuming food altogether and transition completely to pranic nourishment, to pranic breathing, because every breath you take and every breath you release is also the death of a huge number of living organisms. Microbes, bacteria, they are also conscious. They also want to live. Yes, there are, of course, microorganisms for which death is not evolutionarily intended, but that's far from all microorganisms. In this format, in this conceptual framework, what was written by this person, it just doesn't work. It's a given, and for it to help you, for it to work, it has to be just a facet of spiritual development. Facet, path. These processes are relevant for those who already want to leave this world, who has come to terms with all their passions, who has entered such a state when he is absolutely indifferent. What's happening here? This is a person who is ready to go into a cave and dissolve there in the body of light, or someone who is ready to go somewhere into the mountains, into solitude, into hermitage, and meditate there until the moment of departure. Yes, this happens at the very end, when a person is already being reborn further. It's the same as us, while being inside the mother's body, sucking the juices from it. But at some point, we stop doing that and move on to self-sufficiency. It's the same here. We kill in order for the physical body to live. But at some point, we stop doing this and move to self-sufficiency. The same goes here. We kill in order for the physical body to live. We kill plants, we kill animals. But at some point, moving forward, yes, it makes sense to stop all of this. I'll say it again. These are practices of departure. Already, having done this, there will be no answers to questions, no practices, no consultations. None of this will exist anymore. To live in the illusion that by making one movement related to digestion, you will immediately get everything is a profound misconception.
It's interesting, when Anton eats meat, he understands that he's not just eating some food, but he's participating in something. In doing so, he is involved in the killing of a living being, whose body that meat belonged to. Or is he not aware of this? When someone decides to eat meat, he also decides to share with the killers their responsibility towards that living being.
Isn't it clear? In general, I understand what the person says, but I don't agree with him. Therefore, I will continue to act in a way that is more understandable to me. And to make it clearer to others why I do this, I can only suggest developing extrasensory perception. And when a person's worldview and the perception of the world go beyond matter, what is this person fighting for now? For the flesh? For what is allotted 100 years, being a human? For the fact that it will still die? It is not eternal. You see, if the question were conceptually about a living being living forever, and I am cutting off its life, then perhaps it would have some more serious meaning. So it will still perish. Animals eat each other. And their karma doesn't get worse because of that. People eat plants and their karma doesn't get worse because of that. People eat other animals. And everything is balanced at this moment in time. Because we are also eaten and we are also part of the food chain. And the fact that the person who asked this question doesn't see how he is being eaten doesn't realize this, doesn't understand it, doesn't mean that he is outside of this chain. This means that he has been so starved that he no longer has any ability to perceive this. I have the ability to perceive, I see, I feel like something on an energetic level, I'm actually making a sacrifice. After that, it multiplies through me as consuming meat. I compensate for it by giving back on other levels. In other processes, balance doesn't disappear, it is always present so. To break free from such a rigid concept. In order for a person to become free from such thinking, they need to develop their extrasensory abilities, to develop the skill to feel and see energies. You need to see that you are not just a piece of meat. You need to see that the animal is not just a piece of meat. You need to see that that little piece of consciousness that has entered the body of the beast, she, in the end, must exit this body of the beast. Having gained this experience, it can exit the body of the beast, having had various experiences of exiting. So, the world is multifaceted. In the world, all possible variations are manifested. There are variations when a predator kills its prey. There are variations when the prey, by some miracle, injures the predator, and then it dies of hunger. There are variations when the prey kills a person and eats them. There are countless variations. This is life. This is a dance. This is the dance of life and death. Consciousness flows in here, comes out, goes in, comes out. It enters one body, then another, then a third, a fifth, a tenth. Then it all spreads out again, disembodies and loses its structure. It's an endless process, this movement. And here, a person is just like a dam with this bone-deep thinking. That's it. I'm just flesh. I'm just protecting the rights and values of matter. But what do you do with the energy? But what do you do with the consciousness? And I can even say more. When a conscious person eats, they can allow the consciousness that they've taken in to emerge. The same carrot, a little tomato, can give that consciousness the opportunity to reach such levels, which, being this consciousness in a little tomato, is completely inaccessible. So I have a human structure, a large-scale structure. A plant doesn't have that kind of structure. An animal, a beast, also doesn't have that kind of structure. In order for the consciousness inside the beast to reach some fiery levels of space, well, some kind of miracle has to happen, for example. But having entered me, yes, I will digest its flesh. That's right. But its consciousness passing through me like a stream can reach those dimensions where, being in its own body, it wouldn't be able to get to at all. Why not? That also has a place, but a person doesn't see this, that asks such a question. It's not even a question, but a comment that he's writing. In his worldview, such mechanisms do not exist. And in my worldview, such mechanisms exist because I see them. I urge people to learn to see these mechanisms, to learn to perceive them. Don't believe me. Okay, don't believe me. Practice. See how it works. If you don't like that I eat meat, fine, go to someone who doesn't eat meat. Let them train you to see these processes. Look at how it works. So what's the bottom line? In the end, we have those people who refuse to eat meat. Sometimes they even age and die faster than those people who have eaten meat their whole lives. So that's what we have in the end. Well, I also want to add a little bit that dying, this is not a spiritual achievement. This is what happens to any person, no matter how he behaves here.
I respect Anton for his critical, clear thinking and vast experience as an esoteric practitioner. Ultimately, our world is predatory. So, if you don't eat meat but consume herbs and dairy plant foods, you also lower your vibrations. And we are all part of food chains. It doesn't matter whether you eat meat or not, you're still being eaten. If not through low vibrations, then through high ones. It's very hard to develop emotional detachment.
Well, this person is already saying absolutely the right things. This person is very much like a human who has extrasensory abilities. He is absolutely right when he says that yes, you eat and you get eaten and that's it. It's balanced and harmonized. And what if we add to this? And let's add that the being, the real conscious being, is just one. And this is in one way or another also true. In the books, in the texts, there, the one God, the one creator, is actually eating himself. So on a global scale, at a level, no one kills anyone. It's just an endless play, an endless dance of forms, and this dance is of a single, unique being. That's why we dug very deep. This is not something that can even be perceived through extrasensory means. These are already very deep immersions that you can experience, maybe once every 6 months. That's if you're lucky, but if you reach these states, then really no more questions on this topic arise. You just see the patterns, you just see the movement of energy, and you see that death is just as much a part of you as all the other forms of manifestation. And you see it as one whole. This conscious being is simply changing structures, forms, multidimensionalities, and variabilities. It dances by itself. This is what you see.
Another comment. Do not kill and only eat meat on holidays. And then it's okay to eat it, to be an accomplice to mass killings of our lesser brothers. A very strange tradition. And why is such a tradition even needed? And this practice of this young man, if it doesn't lead a person to love, what is the point of a road that doesn't lead to love? Another one of those sadistic, bloodthirsty sects that are already numerous on earth. Why confuse people's minds with such dark traditions and practices? It's your business, psychic. But what you have created in the minds of those who have not yet awakened will come back to you.
That's a comment filled with love. You can feel the person's spirituality. It's just overflowing with spirituality. Now the walls here are going to start bending. Well, if the person didn't like me, what can I do about it? I don't have the goal of pleasing everyone. My goal is to fulfill my intention. What I do, how I act. I've explained many times why it is this way and not otherwise. If a person doesn't want to eat meat, then don't eat meat. No one is forcing anyone. I'm not forcing anyone. In general, there's a very interesting maneuver that I know of. A maneuver for manipulating and controlling the masses. When a person is deprived of light, easily digestible food, and yes, I call meat a quick energy, a powerful energy. It's low frequency enough, but it's quite powerful. Try going without meat. I don't know. Chop some firewood for the winter. Try running a marathon without meat. 1 in a million, one vegetarian out of a million will be able to run a marathon without meat. And that's probably the case. The one who runs a marathon without meat still consumes all these components one way or another, just through other products. Let's say it's a quick, easy way to get it. At the physical level, there's a lot of energy. And when you need to take control of another person, you can suggest to them not to eat meat. And then he turns into a paste, into a herd that is very easy to control. Yes, his sensory qualities become more refined. Yes, he starts to see and perceive things better, but he loses quite strong willpower and determination. And in some traditions, in some cases, I know for sure that people are deliberately deprived of access to meat products so that they become more receptive. And then, when they are already recoded, their thinking is rewired. Well, then do whatever you want. You won't be able to escape.
What traditions are you talking about?
Listen, I haven't been fully briefed about the Dalai Lama yet, so let's not mess around for now. I'm also waiting for the belt with gifts from Sadhguru because I'm not getting involved either. He responded to it because I also called him a person who, due to the consciousness of other people, simply creates an avatar for himself. And that's it. And the same goes for him. He influences his followers to realize his values. Well, I'm waiting for feedback on this matter. But I'm still going to say things like that, because you never know someone who is sincerely searching, who really wants to know, how is it? In fact, he will listen to this and speed it up a lot. Their path of understanding rather than stumbling over some rigid traditional system. And what I say out loud about traditions is just a way to define myself. That I'm not a person who invented something on my own, who saw something on my own. I am a person who has been trained. And that's why I can say absolutely, calmly and confidently that yes, I was trained and I can teach. People, WHO, sometimes, it happens that one person has a talent for something, while another person doesn't have that talent. And so, how a talented person will teach another person who isn't talented, someone who has never been taught? How will he teach another person? Where will he get those skills from? That's why I use the word traditions, but it's not religion. This is not a rigid conceptual system. It's a system where you acquire skills and mastery. Then you go into free sailing to realize what resonates with your soul.
All right. Then tell our viewers about the souls of animals.
About the souls of animals, this is also yet another intermediate stage of perceiving the reality of what is happening. Let's start with the soul of a person. When a person is searching for their soul, at first they find something separate. Then, if he is not satisfied with that, he starts searching for what is in the soul of the soul and in the soul of the soul. And at some point he reaches a level where everything is one. The same goes for animals. Yes, there is a layer where there is one soul for the entire species. There is such a layer, but beneath this layer there is another layer and another layer and another layer. And at some point, just like with a person, all of this becomes whole and unified. As far as your mastery allows you to see these levels, that's how deeply you will be able to look behind the curtain of our universe. And in order to do this, I know the methods that I share and demonstrate. There are surely other various methods and approaches, but which I don't use because I don't master them. But what I master, well, I am occasionally allowed to observe these processes and to step out from under the influence of the illusions that there is something out there that doesn't relate to me and there is something here that is mine. No, this is separation, dismemberment. This is ultimately an illusion. This is Maya. It's just a layer. The universe beneath which there is still so much that is hidden. If we look at the energy of animals, they don't even have access to those dimensions that humans have. So, up to a certain dimension, they have their own manifestation. Their energy body. Their energy body doesn't extend any further. That's how it is.
For example, there was a little dog, a cow. It died. What happens to her soul next? Will she also be a cow? A little dog?
No. Most likely she will just dissolve like a drop in the ocean. And you won't be able to identify her in any way. She will dissolve into the original being, and that's it. And then from that original being, a little drop will form, which will again enter into a little dog, into a cow, into someone else. In order to experience those states that are possible and accessible on a physical level. The closer the beings are to humans, the more opportunities and space for maneuvering there are. Animals have very little space for maneuvering, but that doesn't mean they are disconnected from the original. They are not disconnected from the creator. It's just very complicated in their hierarchical system, without losing their self-identification, to move deeper. Most likely it's impossible. I didn't remember myself as a little dog or a cow, but most likely it's incredibly more complicated than being a human. It's pretty easy for humans to do this. It's probably very hard to understand what I'm saying out loud right now. What the hell are you seeing? But it's roughly the same as, let's say, a palm with fingers. And I have a head. Here in the head, vision and hearing are concentrated. Smell, taste, and touch. But in the palm, only touch is concentrated. And so perceiving reality with the palm is incredibly more difficult than in the head. But at the same time, it's all one whole. And it's the same with animals. This is also a part of the creator. This is also a part of all creation. But in this state, it's incredibly more difficult. Without losing their self-identity, without losing their memory, to perceive what we live in. But for a human, it's very easy to do this in relation to an animal. In relation to an animal, but that doesn't mean that a person will do it just because they died. No, if you just died, it doesn't give you the chance to see the whole reality. This is exclusively a path that takes an incredibly long period of time, which still allows you to reach out. To perceive everything that's happening in that case, if you actually need it at all. If you don't need it, you will be disembodied. The same goes for animals, the same goes for plants. Somehow, without any possibility to preserve their self-identity, to preserve their memory, to preserve this flow along the timeline It's the same as a drop in the ocean, just like that, and that's it. And you won't be able to get her back.
Another expert in the comments revealed a shocking truth about you. He is Asur. They're not about love. But that's not bad. These are other beings. He talked the whole way. I did, I'm doing great. This is asuric nature. They are achievers. They've been making wise gestures with their fingers all along. Very proud, that guy. I like it. He does business, comrade. What kind of love is that?
A wonderful love, unconditional.
Are you Asur? Confess?
I have asuric energies within me. I have asuric manifestations, of course. But they're not the only ones. There are also angelic vibrations. There are etheric energies. There are divine energies. And you know what's the most interesting part? It's all present in every person. And even in that commentator who writes this comment, there are both original elements and asuric ones. And only the limitations of his perception prevent him from agreeing with that. But if we could somehow expand his perception, he would see that, fundamentally, we are all absolutely identical. And only the limitations of his perception prevent him from agreeing with that. And if his perception could be expanded, he would see that, fundamentally, we are all absolutely identical. Some people strive for one thing, while others strive for another. Some people exercise their free will, while others delegate it and continue to manage it. Becoming a slave. Some people confine themselves to rules and orders. Some people reject any rules and orders. And a global dance of a single being occurs in all its various manifestations. I've seen these processes. I encourage people to practice until they can see these processes. When you see it for yourself, not from books, not from your teacher's stories, not from some guy on the internet. When you see it all yourself, and when you, a guy from the internet, you realize it's nothing. Confused moving towards it for years. You realize that it's nothing, nothing at all, that you got a bit confused when you were moving towards it for 5 years, 10 years, half your life, 2/3 of your life. You're moving in that direction, and in the end, you reach a point where there's not the slightest doubt about the nature of the world. I understand. Yes, you can doubt it when you were there, lost consciousness, saw something, and then came back to yourself. And whether it was like that or not, when you are purposefully moving towards something, more or less everyone sees it the same way. Yes, they use different words, choose different epithets, but the essence is the same. So, of course, there are Assyrian energies within me. From the most terrifying, nightmarish demons, devils, and everything else to the brightest, purest, original, whole, and unified. Everything exists. And depending on what kind of dance I'm dancing, those are the facets I turn into. There is knowledge that is called knowledge. Sri Yantra, it's all described in detail there. But just finding this information and getting familiar with it doesn't change anything on a global scale. Only those who find all of this within themselves experience a global change. Find it in their energy, find it in their nature. And such a person is already. You can't push someone like that off their path. You can't convince them otherwise. Such a person no longer doubts anything. He is simply moving towards the realization of his intention. Not someone else's, but their own, with love in their heart, sincerely. And with all the other energies that make their dance and movement much richer and more diverse. Then, if you hold back in some concepts, that cut you off from everything. The palettes of strings up to about 2 or 3.
So, let's shift to the topic of love.
Let's go.
And here's the first comment. I live with a sense of love, but you have nothing about love. You even have parents, strangers. I have a different sense of the world. I don't believe you.
I'm not saying that nothing about love. Such a comment puts me in a deep silence. Actually, it doesn't lead me to any kind of contemplation. Well, the person is just not familiar with what I'm saying, so what else can be said? He is not familiar with the fact that it's not just a parent, but a parent because one of my parents has passed away. One is still alive. He doesn't know that I've talked about love an incredible number of times. I talked about unconditional love, I talked about the soul. I provided completely open practices that are available right here and now, and you don't have to pay money for them. These practices are available on my YouTube channel. I periodically do spontaneous practices for people who are searching, who reach out to me Not with statements, but with questions. If a person comes to me with statements, I listen to them and then move on with my life. I have nothing to say to him. If a person comes to me with a question, I will answer that question within my capabilities, of my knowledge, my strengths, and this is happening all the time. We see the comments of a person who isn't even familiar with my work. How should I react to this? With love.
If spiritual practice and meditation are not connected to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, then they have no meaning. And the goals of life, it's just a waste of time and energy and possibilities. Are your spiritual practices connected to Krishna?
My spiritual practices are connected to Krishna because I see Shiva in Krishna. And I also see Shiva in every living being. So everything is fine. There are no problems. Har Har Mahadev. Each of us is Mahadev, naturally. He is originally manifested in Krishna. And in the commentator, he is originally manifested. And in you and me, he is originally manifested. That's why we do good deeds. We are understanding ourselves, the universe we are in.
Many people in spirituality prefer to see sex as something dirty. What should one give up? And here's the commentary. A year without sex, I barely made it. Haha. So he lives by instincts like an animal. Sex is needed for conceiving a child. And that's it. If you are having sex and not having children, you are under the control of your shallow desires. Do you agree with this statement?
It's true that I went a year without sex. I was studying these processes so that it wouldn't just be empty talk, but rather my life experience. I felt fine, everything was good for me, and then I allowed myself to have sex. You know what's the most interesting thing? I felt fine, everything was good for me. You see, there's a huge temptation to simplify yourself so much that it's like this, yes, and like that, no. Well, that's immediately duality. That's immediately where there is no unity. Through sex, yes, you can degrade, you can crystallize, you can lose your mobility and your love, your heart. You can get torn apart through sex, or maybe, on the contrary, you can multiply if you genuinely feel something there, if there's passion. If you see the manifestation of the goddess in your partner or the god in your partner, the deity. If you interact not as pieces of meat and flesh that just rub against organs with nerve endings, and how will you multiply the divine masculine through the feminine if you have such sex? It's a diverse process. And you, see, it's the same as saying you're sitting still, so you're a scoundrel. But what if I'm meditating? On the contrary, I'm developing, understanding myself and reality. And there are people who sit still and doze off. Well, you see, form, sex. But that's just too little to speak about it definitively. So when I touched all of this, when I processed it through myself, I was also hurt by rigid conceptual beliefs. That sex is bad? Yes. I was hurt by this and I can't call it anything else. There was a book that put this nail in my head. I agreed with him, and it was really hard for me to let that go. Because this primitive system takes from what? Well, everything there is easy and clear. But after a while, you realize that something isn't working. Well, at first it seems like it's working, but in the long run, you definitely see that something's off. What is this? It shouldn't be set up like this. I didn't stop. I kept digging into this topic. I came to the conclusion that the problem isn't in sex, but in my own state. If you're doing it from a place of hatred, aggression, anger, rejection, violence, then you'll start to crystallize, to structure yourself. It's like touching a cold piece of metal with your tongue. You stick to it as quickly as possible, and your tongue starts to atrophy just as fast. And if you do it with fire in your heart, if you see this dance of the masculine and feminine, not of flesh, but of essence, energy, whirlwind, Shakti, core, Shiva, then it's completely different. So, what can I say about this comment? I'm doing well. I'm not complaining. If a person is complaining, it's probably worth practicing. I'm actually teaching practice.
All right, let's advise him to practice. He can do it below, in the link under this video. And everything will be fine for him right away. You said what now? Our planet is in a period called Kali Yuga. It's a period in which every living being degrades if they do nothing for their development. But not all viewers agree with that. Here, listen. One of the important but quite common misconceptions highlighted from Indian religions is that Kali Yuga began only 1250 years ago, and now we are living at the very end of it. So it's the cycle of human history, not hundreds of thousands of years, but just 5,000 years. Right now, the very war of the Mahabharata, described in the scriptures, has begun, after which a global cataclysm will occur. History will start anew from the Golden Age, the Satya Yuga.
The commentator's profound ignorance, who confuses the timelines of Brahma's sleep with the timelines of human life, if he had read the books a little more carefully, he would have seen that, yes, there is a timeline in the years of Brahma, the god. And there is a timeline in human years. And so, in the human calendar, Kali Yuga lasts 400 thousands of years. And in human years, it has been 5,000 years since the beginning of Kali Yuga, thousands of years. And in human years, it has been 5,000 years since the beginning of Kali Yuga. And we still have to live here without worrying. And for our generations and generations and generations. And this won't end anytime soon. The events described us in the Mahabharata also took place, and they, like an echo, constantly resonate in the historical line of humanity, periodically intensifying or weakening. These events, like an echo, are reflected in a person's struggle with their own foolishness, fights and clashes between the asuras and asuras, clashes between goddesses and demons. They are described not only in the Mahabharata. For example, such a wonderful festival as Navaratri, 9 days of the battle of Durga Devi with the demon Mahishasura. In this event, it echoes every year. And during these periods, all these processes intensify, and a person can adapt to these rhythms and win this struggle at least for a year ahead with their own demons. So I can't judge a person for the ignorance that they have. I myself don't know everything, and I'm far from fully understanding. But if he continues to insist on this concept, then he will live a life just like everyone else. Sincerely, believing that there is a war now and that we need to fight. I don't want to live that kind of life. I don't want to fight. I strive for freedom. I strive for all kinds of possibilities. I strive for a wide range of perception. I don't want to confine myself to rigid concepts. And potentially, I really want to break out of that space known as sleep Brahma. So I don't even have any possibility to lock myself into this system. Although I completely understand that part of what is written in the comment is valid.
Well, for example, another commentator writes, Kali ended in 1943. Rebirth wrote about this. At the moment after the Battle of Kursk, Tibetan sages came to him and spoke about it. He doesn't know anything. Paul Tun.
Rebirth, where do we have a grave now? Apparently it didn't help him much. You see, if it were enough for a person just to die, probably no one would be engaged in spiritual development at all, because it's obvious that you will die anyway. In various concepts and spiritual beliefs, people who didn't just die but actually left this place were highly valued, because it's obvious that you will die anyway. In various concepts and spiritual beliefs, people who didn't just die but actually left this place were highly valued, and they highly honored people who left this place in the body of light. Yes, these are very rare processes. Not all of them are known, not all of them are described, but they are described, they are known, at least in a small grain. For me, this is a guideline. I'm striving for that. I don't aim to rot in a grave, because I completely understand that to just die, you can do absolutely nothing. Just sluggishly flow from one day to another, and there, your 60, 70, 80 years, you'll just scratch around here. So I don't see any point in orienting myself towards those who are dead. That's my position. It's easier for me. I focus on those who were able to be born further from here, just like we left the space of our mother and didn't die, but were actually born. The way we left the space, our father, and again, didn't die, but transitioned from one body to another. The same process continues when a person, while being in a material body, can be born further into the energy body, a completely energy body, into the body of light. Those people who accomplished this and left knowledge behind, that's what I focus on. And I don't want to orient myself based on the knowledge left by those who went to the grave.
But there are also comments that there's information on the internet saying that period of the beginning and end of Kali Yuga is incorrect. It's been calculated. The teacher of cryo yoga, Imran, said that humanity is entering an era, 2 pairs of yugas. In Iskakon, Vaishnavas say that in Kali Yuga, there is a favorable period for economic and spiritual development lasting 10,000 years, which will soon enter humanity, and then supposedly a period of degradation will follow again.
Well, the previous commentator mentioned 5,000 years, and here it's 10,000 years. You see, what's the catch? I know that there is a person named Imran who, in the same words, in the same concepts, he says what I do, although our traditions do not intersect. So this is Hinduism, and I honestly don't understand why he does this. Because the person who speaks these words out loud, Kali Yuga, epochs, yugas, has very easy access to the description of these epochs, to the signs of these epochs, has very easy access to the description of these epochs, to the signs of these epochs. And in the books, in the tantric literature, in the Vedic literature, the signs of the epochs are described. You don't even need extrasensory perception. You just need to read these signs and look around you. And by these signs, we are currently in the purest Kali Yuga without any hints at something else. The purest. But how to orient oneself to this? What's next? If a person can look around and see these signs, how will he continue to speak? No, the Kali Yuga has ended. We are in the 2 pairs. It has started. If there are no signs of the 2 pairs of yugas, how can one say such a thing? Well, that's either from profound ignorance or to attract more attention to oneself. Then that's just trickery. I don't know, I'm not familiar with him from the Russian Academy of Sciences.
There were comments from seeking individuals. Here's one of them. Thank you for the interview, but I'm still not getting it. What is the benefit of experiencing pain and suffering? And why is a serious illness considered a gift for the soul? Pain, purification. And why is a serious illness considered a gift for the soul?
Pain, purification. Because illnesses are a slowdown of our idiocy. The fact that you don't perceive your actions and deeds as idiocy is simply due to a narrow perception of yourself. I used to follow the path of healing, regeneration. I don't really understand why this is happening. I had a problem and I was trying to solve it, but after some time, after a certain number of years of practice and self-observation, observing my own energy, I definitely came to the conclusion that first, the energy drops, and it drops because of a spasm. A constricting structure forms. Why does it form? 100,000 million reasons, and you can't possibly write them all down. Because 2 people will perform the same action. One person may experience it while another may not. It's a very multifaceted process, but that's how the mechanism works. A constricting structure appears, energy drops, and illness arises. A constricting structure, why does it appear? Because you start moving very quickly towards your death. And illness is what stops you in your movement towards death. So in a state where your perception is completely reset.
But it turns out that the root cause of illness is that you went the wrong way.
No, why the wrong way? You went straight towards your self-destruction. There.
Always to the same place? Well, some people say that there are many causes of illness. Yeah, sometimes there are just some physical things, I don't know, something else got stuck, and so on. Well, that's not related to any kind of spirituality.
Well, I got it. No, I'm talking to you about the essence, about the tendency. So when a person acquires a tendency towards degradation and doesn't want to stop at all, in this tendency is stopped by illness, meaning we drain a person's energy through their exhaustion and distraction. Imagine, for example, I start to really worry, stress out, and feel depressed about something. Then I get all caught up in it, and suddenly something in my body tears, breaks, or something malignant appears, and all of this external stuff suddenly becomes insignificant. So I got all caught up in something, and then bam, in my body, something tore, broke, or something malignant appeared, and all of this external stuff suddenly becomes like insignificant. It just fades away. And all of this external stuff suddenly becomes somewhat insignificant. It just fades away in relation to what has already appeared within me. It immediately fades away. In relation to what has already appeared within me, I let it go. If I somehow accept it as a given, if I accept it not just as a given, but as certain current conditions from which I can move in any direction, then I have the opportunity to level it all out, to remove it from myself, from which I can move in any direction. Then I have the opportunity to level it all out, to remove it from myself. Not in that sense, that I'm going to remove it from myself, in the sense that I'm changing, I'm no longer clinging some external process in the world, and this illness is no longer needed. There's nothing left to hold back. And why is it like that? Is it working? I have already spoken out loud that there are a great many causes and effects, and describing all of them is madness, because one person went and saved another person, and he's doing well. Another person went and saved another person and then got cancer. How can this be explained in terms of logic? You can't explain it in terms of logic at all. It's a coincidence. It's a coincidence for logic. But if you add energy to this logic, add what happens at the level of subtle bodies, that's where all the most interesting things begin. There is a mechanism related to our consciousness. Our consciousness either crystallizes, freezes, and cools down like a piece of ice, or on the contrary, it melts. It melts and becomes a bit liquidy, like water. If you save a person and your consciousness starts to spasm, because of that, you'll end up with a problem. If you save a person and your consciousness starts to ignite, you'll receive blessings. How will your consciousness react? Only extrasensory perception will show you. Your logic won't show you that. Your logic will most likely deceive you. And so the ability to self-awareness at such a deep level allows us to confidently say that illness is a form of stagnation. And so when a person, regardless of what kind of action they take, faces the fact that their consciousness starts to crystallize, if this crystallization happens too quickly, they will get sick. And then this crystallization will slow down. He will be distracted from this process. Just like I've often called it, all sorts of different illnesses are forced austerities. If you don't go into austerity yourself, then you'll end up having to do it forcibly. But again, there are people who can live completely without austerities and feel just fine. I, for example, am a person who has really fallen out of love with austerities, even though I used to engage in them a lot. I've studied this inside and out, all these austerities. Right now I live without them and I'm doing just fine. So I activate the mechanisms of dimming my consciousness for a long period of time, and if it gets activated, I immediately identify it. Oh, my consciousness is starting to dim. You need to urgently sit down for some practice. Loosen up, relax, put the outside world on pause, and spend a little time with yourself. The deity of the heart in an embrace. The deity in the heart, the soul, is always fiery. It's always very easy to ignite it. I can't ignite myself from the reflection in my mirror. I can't ignite myself from an idol or anything like that, but I can ignite myself from my soul. I do this and I recommend everyone to do it. Don't take it to extremes. I'll say it again to make it clear. Illnesses are a slowdown of idiocy.
Hello, Anton. There is an opinion that a person intentionally creating uncomfortable conditions for themselves, like cold water dousing, waking up early, doing physical exercises, and so on, gradually burns off their karma. And when the karmic situation does form, it won't be as harsh as it could have been. For example, if you were destined to get injured in an accident, you might just end up with a scratch. What do you think? Is it really like that? Or is it really impossible to bypass karma, and a person will inevitably receive what they did to others at some point?
I prefer the word to repay debts. Karma is quite an oversaturated term. But when you say out loud to repay debts, it becomes much clearer. Yes, a person can start repaying their debts through their energy. In general, a person can repay their debts, for example, through matter, through the physical world. There's even a saying, Lord, thank you for the money. All of this is indeed the case. But what's really important is the state in which a person does this. If he is in a state of asceticism, and this is nothing but asceticism, you could call it a gate, plus or minus the same thing. When a person engages in such activities like cold water dousing, fasting, abstaining, all of that, if they open their heart in that state, they create a space of love vibrations around them that flow out. If they are radiating from their energy centers into the space around them, and if at that moment they are giving, then yes, undoubtedly, they are burning off their karma. They are repaying the debts they owe to the world. Creates a space of love vibrations around them that flow out from. If he is radiating from his energy centers into the space around him, and if he is giving at that moment, then yes, undoubtedly, he is burning off his karma. He is repaying the debts he owes to the world. But if a person engages in such activities and suffers, hates everyone, gets aggressive, feels heavy, painful, uncomfortable, then they are worsening their situation. He gets aggressive, it's hard for him, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. Then they are worsening their situation. Because in our world, people are extremely unwelcome that generate rejection, disapproval, and all sorts of negativity. And then his asceticism, his practice, his gait only amplify these states and worsen his situation. That's why it's very important to look at the person's state, what state he is in, what he is experiencing, and what state he is striving for. And yes, with the suggested methods, you can speed up these processes, but they in no way compensate for them. And that's why just doing this won't work. Too little for repaying debts. But if a person is radiating energies of love flowing from their energy centers, flowing through their channels, meridians, then that's absolutely natural for a person. It's not a loss for them. The only difference is in the intensity flowing through their channels, meridians, which is absolutely natural for a person. So this is not a loss for them. The only difference is in the intensity. I mean, I want to explain that when a person inhales and exhales, they don't lose anything in the process. That's his rhythm. The same goes for our energy. It comes in and goes out of us, and he doesn't lose anything in the process. If he is a very good conductor of energy, if he pours out a lot from himself, energy, meaning he passes a lot of energy through himself, if he is capable of generating such energetic states, how love burns karma. Focusing solely on asceticism can worsen one's state, and it's possible that there won't even be any consequences at all for the fact that he broke the drone at the time. But you can also worsen your condition if you look only at the practice itself, only at the asceticism itself.
A female viewer asks, isn't it too late to develop feminine whirlwinds within oneself at 45? By the way, this refers to a practice from the course on the power of consciousness in practical energy work. Whirlwind in the womb. The link, by the way, is in the description. Can you tell me more about what this practice gives and whether it works at the age of 45 and older?
Yes, it works even at 90. In us, throughout a person's life, it's very rare for something in the human body to fall off completely, irreversibly. At the level of energy, that doesn't happen at all. The other thing is that, yes, we can tighten ourselves up, go into spasms, crystallize, become denser, and dim down. All of this is true, but we can also reignite ourselves, and age is no barrier to practice. To reignite myself, and age is no barrier to practice.
And what does it give? What does this practice give?
And what does a person need from this life? What is his intention? What is this person's goal? And these whirlwinds, these practices will give him the opportunity to achieve his goals much faster and more effectively, because it's movement, it's power, it's energy, it's life energy, it's tone. And whatever a person applies this to, that's what they'll get. Therefore, the determining factor will still be the person's intention. And whatever a person applies this to, that's what they'll get. So the determining factor will still be the person's intention. Why is she doing this? And when she starts doing this, understanding why she's doing it, she will get much closer to realizing her request.
When I close my eyes, I see a big eye. Sometimes it's scary. What do you think this person sees?
Cartoons. When we start to perceive with our basic extrasensory abilities, and while the brain is still awake, it tries to draw it out, some suitable images. In general, it's a very interesting process. It is studied in psychiatry and psychology. The process is that we don't see the real world. We see something that our brain draws for us, and it does so with a certain delay in time. Moreover, it draws this incorrectly. This is easily proven with all sorts of different pictures. Illusions, optical, when the eye, something transmits a signal to the brain and the brain draws a picture for you. You see one thing, but in reality it's not like that. Two lines, you see that one is longer than the other, but in reality they are the same length. Two squares, you see that one is white and the other is black, but in reality they are both gray. And there are a huge number of such pictures on the internet. They can be found by searching for their optical illusions, pictures with optical illusions. And just to make sure that you can't even perceive the normal world with your own eyes, and when your perception through your radars, your energy radars, picks up on the energy perception, the brain panics and tries to substitute something that resembles what is currently being perceived. And so, yes, it is possible to find an energy process for which the picture of the eye will be suitable at the first stage. The brain simplifies vision. With practice, can we see a deeper reality? But if a person continues to practice, if they delve deeper with their pure consciousness into what is being perceived, will the brain eventually give up? It will stop drawing pictures, and the person will see such a multidimensional, diverse, and multifaceted structure, a pattern, where it will be almost impossible to find the right words to describe it. This will be pure perception. But it takes time. At first, when the ability to perceive energy is just beginning to open up, our brain will substitute some suitable images that don't always accurately reflect reality.
Many people who go through your courses notice positive changes in their lives, but not everyone is satisfied with the results. Here's an example. Anton, greetings. Practices are very helpful. A lightness of the body and a lightness of life appear, but there's no progress in the dream body. I can't seem to become aware in my dreams, although I've started to remember my dreams better after waking up. And there is a feeling of resistance in the dream. Someone is hindering the awareness. You just need to keep practicing actively, or maybe do something special.
The paradox of this question is that it's not in the course of practical energy work, nor in the course of transcendent speed. There are no practices for out-of-body experiences. But I know these practices one way or another. Sometimes I share and show them in the open spaces of the internet. And I do this simply because I know it, because people ask me about it. That's why there's no clearly defined system within the course. Do you understand? So this practice is somewhat of an external technique that I also possess. So in order for all of this to start working, you need to know some very, very important nuances.
A question about vision with closed eyes? When I close my eyes, I don't fly away anywhere. Inner vision turns on. And I kind of continue to see the room I'm in, my body. I can look at myself from the outside, like flying away. For example, moving up the central flow and looking at the center. I feel like something is attached to the body, but it can fly away even over long distances. I see, as if in Twilight, kind of, the LED backlight on the TV has burned out. Because of this, it's hard to examine anything in detail. I can only see general images. Why is that? There's not enough energy. How can I enhance this? I also noticed that if I relax my eyeballs and the area behind my eyes, it automatically appears. It's like a second screen that is positioned in front of and above eye level. The image there is clearer and the screen is a bit brighter. There. It's as if you're watching on a TV, what you're requesting. No, it's this attachment to the body. However, I also want to increase the brightness and quality. Which of this is inner vision? And how are these screens different? And how can I increase the brightness and quality images? By the way, that's what I wanted to say. I have that too. When I just start to fall asleep, it also seems to me that I see my own room with my eyes closed. For example, or my body in such a picture, gray and noisy. This is how they applied that effect. This is how I see it. I also have a question. What is that?
Well, first of all, a person can see with their eyes closed. It can be trained. It can be practiced. Well, it probably can even be applied somewhere. A person can even learn to see with their palm in certain shapes, in some suitable images and pictures that will resemble the perception of the eye. These effects are definitely present. It all starts happening when the area of the forehead, starting from the space between the eyebrows and up to hairline, it begins to relax. And from there, the constricting structures go away. When the spasms start to go away from there, what a person is asking about the screen, it was all there. I described and talked about it in the course on the power of consciousness in practical energy work. In the first course, there, I go into detail about this screen and what it's called, the area of the sixth gate, and about the fact that this area needs to be relaxed. To relax, to allow the energies to move freely and without obstruction there. I'm showing that it's exactly these constricting structures, how they form, how they can be removed. How can we interact with them to remove them even faster? Even more effectively, how to dissolve them, burn them, and finally get rid of them. I'm talking about the processes and channels through which it can be done to cleanse this space between the eyebrows up to the hairline, and in general, this whole area. The forehead is cleansed by a flow that goes through the spine, and this is all covered in the practical energy course. Also, this space is duplicated at the back of the head. All of this is generally called the six gates, and You need to train, work, and practice with it, and then the quality of your vision will improve. The more we relax this area, the more we loosen it up. The more intensely the energy moves there, the better the perception will be, the clearer the picture will be. And the fact that this starts to happen, yes, but gradually, just like a fire ignites, these effects also start to manifest gradually. The right process, a good process, and the fact that a person apparently is not familiar with my course, has seen some practices somewhere else, and these processes have started happening on their own, spontaneously. This is a good practice. He needs a proper, clearly structured foundation right now, and that's it. And you can already be in the body of light.
Thank you. And here Natalia talks about her feelings like this. The burning sensation behind the chest and in the heart area is constant right now. Please explain this phenomenon.
Yes, this is not a phenomenon. This is also part of the effects from the practice when we start moving towards Bindu in our heart, towards the soul in our heart, to the divine in your heart. This is more or less the same term, but perhaps except for Bindu. Bindu is more multifaceted than just the word soul, not just saying thanks and moving on. And so when a person starts to move towards it, when they begin to establish real energetic relationships with their soul, not the kind where I just shake the air and say, oh, soul, I thank you, blah, 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 and then run off. No, when this starts to activate the energy, when the constraining structures begin to dissolve here, there can be very serious layers. No, but when does this start to activate the energy? When the constraining structures begin to dissolve here, there can be very serious layers, spasms and tightness. Even on a physical level, sometimes the muscles here are just permanently tense. It starts to pull the person in, affecting their posture, making their shoulders slump. This is all a reflection of energetic processes already happening on a physical level. When all of this starts to relax, to loosen up, when the energy begins to move, you might feel that burning sensation, tingling. It can even start to itch. You might feel a very strong pressure, like something has been driven into you around the heart area. A spike that's so hard and firm, but all of this dissolves, it all disappears. It's just stages of opening your heart. And when do these processes happen? And when this burning sensation, when these initial, well, maybe not the most pleasant feelings disappear, in their place comes the perception of love, the perception of fire, the perception of flow. It's a much more pleasant process, much more pleasant energies. But still, one way or another, a person will initially have to break through the digging structures, if they are there.
So their state, here, the ones they describe, that's normal? Yes, and all of that will pass.
I went through that state.
Because later Natalia also writes that after the practices in the course of the power of consciousness, her beyond limit speed has significantly increased. Pressure in the space behind the eyes. What does this mean?
This means that she always had pressure there. Now she sees him. Now she starts to perceive it. A person who develops the skill of extrasensory perception makes a lot of discoveries. And in most cases, yes, there's a temptation to say, oh, something has appeared in me. Yes, no, you've always had it. It's just that now you realize it, now you perceive it, and now you can work with it. Obviously, to work with this, don't imagine, don't fantasize. I don't have such a term in the courses as let's imagine something. No, we won't imagine anything for ourselves. We take our energy, learn to feel it, and start working with it. And now the person has felt their energy. I saw this constricting structure, this drop, this tightness, and then this tightness needs to be dissolved to loosen. And then dissolving and loosening is not difficult. And then live your life in such a way that it doesn't tighten up again, and it will tighten up again. Because it's one thing when you release your energy in practice, and it's a completely different thing when you go into everyday life, making the actions and decisions you're used to. You react to the outside world in familiar ways, and these spasms start to come back to you. You make familiar reactions to the outside world, and these spasms start to come back to you. Well, at least now you see it, you realize it. Can you prevent it from happening again? To say, yes, no, that's it. I won't react like that anymore. I won't multiply this within myself anymore. These endless spasms and tightness. But this needs to be perceived, it needs to be seen. So the person saw it, and the next step is to loosen up, and the next step is to catch yourself in the act. When it starts to tighten up again, and that's it, there are no more problems.
And here's Sergey, for example, asking if there's a connection between my practices and what's happening around me. Internet outage, power failure, the car completely broke down, and I got a little hurt. It's like I've been stopped.
Do you understand what effect this has? Very interesting. I've seen that too, I've dealt with it as well. It's one thing when you're exhausted, when you have no strength, and you're ranting, hysterical, and fussing, safe for the world. Practices give you strength, practices give you power, and when you start to behave powerfully, you just sweep away everything around you. You create chaos, you cause a ruckus because you are powerful, you are present, and your energy can even affect the equipment if you don't keep yourself in balance. You create chaos, you cause a ruckus because you are powerful, you are present, and your energy can even affect the equipment if you don't keep yourself in balance, in harmony. In Renov's, Sergei describes quite correctly that it was as if something stopped me. You need to take a holistic approach to your development and understand that if you, through practice, reveal your power, reveal your strength, then you need to behave accordingly. Considering this power, otherwise you'll be sowing chaos around you. I've also had times when I was practiced, when my energy was present, something is starting to irritate me. Something is beginning to throw me into restless, chaotic processes. My computers were burning up. It blew out light bulbs, it blew fuses, the wiring in the wall was actually sparking. But then time and again I kept restoring all of it, paying to fix everything over and over. I finally pulled myself together and stopped being this giant that just crushes everything around me. I started to be more calm. I stopped being this giant that just crushes everything around me. And I started to be more calm. To approach everything more philosophically, not to stress out and not to destroy your own space with your own energy. My own space, the one I live in, a person just needs a little more love, a little more peace, a little more of that meditative state, because great power implies a big impact on the outside world. And that's exactly what the practices provide.
Thank you very much. If we get any new interesting comments, we'll come back to you for answers.
I'll be waiting for you, and I'll be happy to answer any interesting comments.
Do you want to unlock your inner strength and learn to manage energy? The course, Power of Consciousness 1. Practical energy will provide you with tools to improve health, develop intuition, and gain a deeper understanding of the world. Join and start changing your life right now. Link in the description.